Can you hear me? Can you hear me okay? Perfect. So since I'm in the presence of Master Jedi, I feel the Force already. So
It's the only thing he'll remember about me 2 weeks from now.
No. I think he did a great job with the keynote. So many new things we learned about it. So let's give you a big round of applause.
Thank you. Thank you.
So I grew up in India. My dad was in the Indian military for 40 years. My mother is a fashion designer. Two very diverse, different people. But in India, with 1 billion and over population, the only way you stood out was if you really did well in school. And the way we did well in school was going through books after books after books. And it was a set curriculum from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m., Monday through Saturday, and you had to go through the grind. Thank God I really enjoyed sciences, because that's what propelled me to get into engineering. But a big switch happened when I moved to United States about 15 years back to do my master's in electrical engineering. I really felt like free, because in Wisconsin, that's where I went to school, now not only did I have to learn, but apply that learning. And that was a very different mindset. And after graduating from Wisconsin, I joined Qualcomm right out of school. It's been 13 amazing years. And that was another switch in learning, because now it's not only about asking the whys. Why does this happen? Why does gravity work the way it works? It was really about thinking about what ifs. What if we created a very interactive display so that you could have all the information that you wanted in the world right at your fingertips? What if we didn't have to go to doctors? What if we could have perfect healthcare right at your home? So all these, over time, the learning really switched from the whys to what if. And just recently, I'm a mom to a 14-month-old. The learning has taken a completely whole new level, because it's now not really about how I learn, it's about how I want to expose my daughter to learning. And one of the things you will hear a lot in my questions, I'm really biased toward technology. So I didn't want my daughter growing up afraid of science. So instead of creating a nursery, what we did was we created a lab for her. And I'm not kidding, you can check my Facebook, but it's called Zia's Lab. Her name is Zia. And we have a 3D printer there. All the decorations in her bedroom are 3D printed. And the whole idea was, because learning should not be in school. It should be everywhere, because that's what encourages you to question things in a very different mindset. So I think the first key question, as I was talking to Dr. Chen last week, I was like, what is the importance of this new learning landscape in really nurturing future generation of global leaders? Because today it's not going to be about San Diego. It's not going to be about California. It's really going to be, how are you going to make your mark in this big wide world? So would love to hear your thoughts about the global perspective that these new learning landscapes can bring.
Oh, it's so important. And can you hear me all right? So important that we're raising kids to think globally now. When I mentioned the advantages of diversity, of having so many languages and cultures here in San Diego, the reason that becomes important is because of globalization. If our economy was just an American economy or a San Diego regional economy, that would be one thing. But now, of course, I don't have to tell you this, but we have to think globally. It's a global economy. So the more our kids have exposure to other cultures, other languages, other peoples, other histories, that strengthens what San Diego can do. I like to say also that the internet is a real tool here, that the internet makes learning international, that our kids, when I was in high school, the only student from another country that I met was our AFS student from Paris. Until the age of 18, I knew one person from another country. She was given the Best English Student Award by our high school faculty. I don't know quite what that means about the rest of this. But now, students are doing language exchange with kids from around the world. There are all these platforms where kids and schools can connect up kids around the world. It's very exciting. And one of the most motivating things kids want is to learn about kids from other countries. And now we have that platform to do it.
Perfect. It's really interesting when I talk about platform, I think about Qualcomm, because what we've created with the smartphone technology is really interesting. So I really do need to talk to those Lena people, because they should be putting smartphones in babies,
exactly.
Right? My daughter does have iPhone 6, obviously. Very important. The other interesting thing is the whole idea of making sure the right stakeholders are a part of this conversation. I had the innovation group in Qualcomm where our primary focus is how can we come up with new technologies that you will see 4 years from now, but my team is actually inventing them and working on them right now. And diversity, as you mentioned, is a key component, even in that environment, not just in kids, like how to encourage learning. And one of the individuals on my team, he's 24 years old, really smart engineer. And during our conversation, it came up, and he said, yeah, I started coding when I was 3 years old. And I was like, whoa, that was just mind-boggling. And I said, why? And he said, because my dad was an engineer. He always exposed me to engineering at an early stage. So Dr. Chen, you spoke a lot about different stakeholders in the learning landscape. And corporations or parents are key stakeholders in that entire equation. Who are the other stakeholders that we should be talking to, influencing, to make sure that all these big ideas can become reality quickly?
Sure. I mentioned some of them. The out-of-school learning environment, of course, the museums, libraries, youth groups, churches. But also, it does come down to policy, doesn't it? Getting our elected officials to understand this new learning landscape. And as I mentioned, a number of mayors are beginning to understand this because they see their economy in their city. And the same thing, they're saying, I want the kids out there in San Diego to be able to live and work in San Diego. We shouldn't have to be issuing so many H-1B visas to bring in professionals from other countries. So how can we get our elected officials to understand this? And that is one of the most difficult things. The way we've organized our school districts, our school boards as elected officials, we want to make sure that they understand that they should be devoting their energies to creating this larger learning landscape, and that there are policies, and I mentioned the funding from the state to support Connect Ed and Learning Pathways. That's a good example of how the other stakeholders can create these environments and show here's what really works. And now, as a mayor, as a state legislator, as a governor, we want you now to invest in this.
Absolutely. That's so important because even if you're in this room and if you're not, I think it's really important that you start engaging in this conversation because this is not just about how you can learn or how your kids can learn. It's really about how this world is going to develop the next big things. And I think learning is such a key component in that. I love to tell stories. If you've not figured that out, I hope this is the time you figure it out. My mother, she is about 65 years old. And her favorite pastime is to FaceTime with my daughter every morning. And my mom had no experience with technology. She was a fashion designer. She still has a small boutique in India. So obviously she's in India. She's FaceTiming with my daughter. So she was visiting us last year. And as I was talking to her, I was like, oh, I don't know how to do this. And my mom, who is 65-year-old, actually teaches me how to do something on a smartphone, which I should know, but I didn't. So what was very interesting for me at that particular point of time was it's not really about technology. It's really about the end user. It's really about who is basically utilizing these technologies in different ways. And one of the recent conversations that I've been very involved with is the role of arts in this entire STEM discussion. Basically, they're calling it STEAM, which is a beautiful word, but I think it's more powerful because it's really not just about the underlying technologies. How do you make a phone call? It's not about that. It's how you're going to use the things that you're creating, the things that other people are creating in a manner that you can come up with new ideas. And for us in Qualcomm, one of the other things that we've done is we've created a Q-Learn platform because we understand in schools, computers and tablets are going to be so important in collaborative learning. So what are your views on STEAM movement and essentially the role that arts would play in the future of learning?
Again, I wish we had a lot more time, but of course, I work for a filmmaker, an artist, and we are really trying to show that the arts and the sciences are not these two distinct, separate fields. And again, if you look at the history going back several centuries when scientists were artists, before there were cameras, scientists had to draw. If you're a botanist, if you're Charles Darwin, you had to learn to draw what you were seeing, botanical art. So we're now coming back around to some of these older ideas where artists, there's also a connection between the arts and the sciences, between programming and coding and the visual arts. In fact, if you look more closely at the skills needed in the digital arts, whether it's video games or special effects, visual effects in films, creation of characters, that really brings together art and science. They're often in visual effects, trying to figure out how to simulate real life. How do creatures and vehicles move in real life? We're going to try to do that digitally through visual effects. They're often referencing physics and chemistry. And just to prove that, I was told not to say this, but I'm going to say it anyway.
That's the way to do it.
Pixar will be announcing a new set of lessons for students and for the rest of us about this connection between the arts and programming and physics and referencing the real-life world. You've seen their films, Cars, and I just saw Frozen, which was a Disney movie, Inside Out. How do they do that? How do they create? Well, you'll see some young digital artists from Pixar coming on and showing you exactly how that's done, the amount of mathematics you need to know, programming, and how things move and behave in real life.
Absolutely. That's
coming
so
in August. So in addition to, and it will help people understand this difference between, is there the arts and then there's science? Well, these two things are very integrated.
And you know, that's so important because one of the things, again, going back to technology, we don't see many women participating in technology, even in the innovation initiative I run, or girls getting into engineering. And now with this, I think there's going to be a new way of expression that is going to really entice young girls, because for women, and I can speak for myself, it wasn't about building new things that got me excited. It was about the impact that those new things could have on the world. And women are so motivated by that. So I'm looking forward to Pixar in a Box for my daughter and myself. So very cool. I'm going to stop at this last question, and then I'll open it up to the audience. As you heard, that Dr. Chen has already published one book, so he's already working on his second one. Do you want to talk about your book and what is the focus of that book?
I'm mainly working on it because people tell me that, you know, you're not like Harper Lee. You write this one bestseller and that's it. You know, you need to, you know, if you're going to do this, write another book. And it is about this theme of young people at the center of their own learning now. I'm still waiting for teenagers to thank us for inventing the internet, which makes all of this possible. But it will be called something like Education with Y-O-U, replacing the U in education. If more young people understood that they can now be in control and design their own learning ecosystem, their own learning landscape, that would really, again, power their own learning. That, like George Lucas, if you're interested in photography, there could be a whole career awaiting you. So it will have these themes of giving young people more flexibility, more freedom, more choice over what they learn and how they learn. And again, we need some education policies that will support that.
That is so important because one of the leaders I admire a lot always says, how can you aspire for something if you don't know it exists? So I think one of the things that we are noticing a lot in a program that I support actively in Qualcomm for past 9 years is called First Robotics Competition. Anyone knows about First Robotics? Yay, awesome. I was actually with Dean Dean came in, who's a US inventor who started that program just 2 weeks back. And that program is so exciting because there the kids are actually building robots, and it's not about building robots. It's about building communities which can come together and solve a problem, and all done with gracious professionalism. That's their underlying key thing, because what we need in the future is a lot of people coming together to ask the right questions so that we can create the right things. And I think having the youth in the middle of that conversation is going to be so critical.
Yes.
So I'm really looking forward to your book. So with that, I'm going to open it up for questions.